All right, JR, we are live here with JR Butler. Welcome to the Post Game Podcast, man. Post Game Podcast, similar ethos, I should say, to the Shift Group and kind of what you've been doing. So I'm looking forward to getting into your story and then just what you've been working on, man, with Shift Group. You're doing some good stuff for athletes, vets. It's cool. So thanks, man.
No, thanks for having me, Joe. I love talking about our mission, and I'm a sales guy, so I love talking about myself. So this is perfect.
There you go. Nobody cares. Work harder. That's over your shoulder. What do you got on that? Is that a Cameron Haynes-ism or what?
I'm the oldest son of a Hall of Fame high school hockey coach from Massachusetts, Joe, which is like, that's like being a high school football coach in Texas or Florida. So it's kind of like we were raised with the belief of like no victims, no entitlement, like plant tomatoes, get tomatoes, and like I'm a huge believer in, you gotta own it. You gotta participate in your own success. Nobody's coming to save you. So I put it right here. It's on every video in our training. It's a reminder to every candidate that signs up for our program that they're in control of their destiny. We care as much about their career as they do, but they've got to care. And ultimately at the end of the day, nobody cares. Just work harder. Like that's
Love it.
Welcome to the world.
Keep going, man. I know that's one of those things where like you hear it all the time, and until you actually think about it, you're like, hey man, nobody cares. Like nobody's coming to save you. So
no, exactly.
Your dad, so you're the oldest of three, right?
Yep.
Okay. Can you share a little bit about that? Just growing up, and I know your one brother played I think it was just one of them, right? Played in the NHL, and
Yep.
I bet that they would probably attribute some of their, or maybe some of his success to getting beat up by you, maybe as a kid, and just learning from your dad. Yeah. What was that like?
He better. He definitely does. He talks about it all the time, and it was like, so I grew up in a really kind of unique situation, right? And at 40, it's easy for me to look back and like understand it, but at the time it was hard because my father is a hockey guy, like eats, sleeps, and breathes ice hockey, and I was the oldest, and my middle brother specifically was a very natural talent. When I was about 33, I asked my dad, when did you know that Bob was going to play in the NHL? And he played in the NHL. He played in the Olympics for Team USA. And my dad said, I knew when he was 7. And like, I don't think I appreciated that as an 11-year-old with a 9-year-old brother that was better at hockey than me. That was hard, dude, especially with the dad that we had, whose whole life was hockey. So that was like, that's been a huge defining thing for like the type of person I am, my work ethic, my approach to life, right? Because I had to go out and earn everything, not, obviously to play Division I hockey, to do what I've done in the business world, but I had to do it to get attention in my house as like a 12-year-old, right? So like, and people talk about like, oh, I'm competitive. I had a little brother that could beat me pretty easily at the thing that we all loved the most and talked about the most and thought about the most. So like when there was a chance for me to beat him in anything else, you bet your ass I took advantage of it, right? Like the example I always use is like we would sit at breakfast and I'd be like, all right, let's see who can finish their cereal faster. And I would freaking snort it just so I could be like, I beat you at something. You know what I mean? So like, that household, and we were pretty close in age, a little over 2 years. And then my youngest brother was 4 years younger than him. So he was kind of behind me 6 years. But he ended up like when he was like 13 years old, he was humongous, and he's still about 3 inches taller than both me and my other brother, and probably outweighs us both by about 40 pounds. He's just a big hammering, like physical defenseman. And so, dude, we had some battles, like as you can imagine.
Sure.
and we still do. Like now it's more on the golf course, and now we all have kids, so like we're trying to get our kids to battle a little bit. So very competitive household, very obviously athletic household, and I found other ways to get attention when I needed to, which some were positive, some were negative, but yeah, I think the way I grew up is literally has made me the person I am. Right, you grow through what you go through. That's me all day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, dude, 100%. Because it's all your environment, right? Like, so for me, I'm the oldest of. I have two younger sisters, so it's different, right? Like I'm the oldest, but it's just a different dynamic. So I was kind of doing my sports thing. My dad was with me, like for all these travel baseball things, and then my mom would be with my sisters. But that's something that I've just been interested in because, like, I played with a bunch of dudes who are, one of three boys, whatever, and it's like the youngest ends up being the kid that gets to the show or like makes it, and it's not always the case, but it seems like more often than not it is, right?
Yes,
And
always.
I made all the mistakes. So it's like did the dumb shit that looking
Yeah,
back I'm like, what were you thinking, But
so
you learn, you just learn. So
you definitely
um
learned it.
but you were pretty good at hockey. You played at Holy Cross. You beat right. I think the claim to fame is you beat Minnesota. That was a really good team back then. Had a bunch
Yeah.
of NHL guys, bunch of our few Hall of Famers, maybe even. So what was it? So what was your experience like at Holy Cross? Because as an athlete, an athlete, right? It's tough, man. Like that's a full-time job, right?
Totally,
Yeah.
totally. Yeah, and like Holy Cross was like it was kind of a wake up moment for me, Joe. Like when I was 15, because I was getting attention in ways that I shouldn't have been. My dad, who was coaching my public high school hockey team, I had a great freshman year, um, and I remember I got into some trouble, and I remember my high school principal talking about this idea. He's like, the problem with high school sports and kids like you, JR, is like when you have the success you have, you end up spending a lot of time with the juniors and seniors, and they're your heroes, and I get it. But we all know what juniors and seniors in high school are doing, right? They're drinking beers, they're going to parties. And I was like kind of following that path. And my dad made the tough decision to take advantage of how I was academically and athletically and send me off to a prep school. And I got some money to go there. And it was like the eighth most expensive secondary school in the country, but it was a hockey school, full stop. It's called Cushing Academy. This is right here. Roll Penguins.
That's
Their their mascot is a penguin. I played football and baseball there, but like you don't have a penguin as a mascot, and you're not a hockey school, right? And that place is like literally like storied, legendary. Um, Second most NHL players in the country have gone from Cushing to the NHL. So I played at a really high level with like really high like future NHLers. So then I went to Holy Cross, and Holy Cross, great school academically, but they're in a like a what would be considered in hockey like a mid-major conference. And I had friends getting drafted, friends getting full scholarships to like Hockey East, CCHA, WCHA. So I was kind of like, I thought my shit didn't stink. I'm like, well, I went to Cushing, and I'm only going to Holy Cross, and I'm only going to play in Atlantic hockey, right? And what I quickly realized is like, no, dude, like one, I was surrounded by really good players. So like in hockey, there's a goal, there's an assist, and there's a second assist. And when you look at my stats, like 90% of my points were second assists because all I did was pass it to somebody good who passed it to somebody better who scored. Right. So I actually wasn't that good. And I walked into Holy Cross with kind of an ego, and I got put in my place in like two captains practices. I was like, shit. But it was an awesome experience. I think what I learned there, especially that my sophomore year when we beat Minnesota, was like the team matters more than anything else, right? Like, and not every sport is like this. I think hockey and baseball especially are like this, and football too. And soccer and other sports, but like it's not a superstar game. It's the whole team, and it's not so much on the ice. it really matters like how a team gels off the ice and how people show up for each other. And I think that was like my biggest takeaway from being part of Holy Cross hockey that year and ever since is that the team is number one always, and that's the type of team we were, and that's why we went into North Dakota, a 2,000 person Jesuit college in the Northeast, with no draftees, no future NHLers, and we beat Minnesota, who had like I think guys on their team won like 7 Stanley Cups. They got 13 of them got drafted, 18 of them played in the NHL. Like it is to this day considered the biggest upset in college hockey history. Many people believe that it started the parity that now does exist in college hockey. Prior to us beating them, a number 4 seed in a regional had never beaten a number 1 seed ever, like in the history of college hockey. Now you're seeing like number 4 seeds win, like Yale and Union and Providence College have all won national championships then. That never happened prior to that. And there was a lot of reasons why we proved that you could. But I think the biggest one was like, that is the closest team I've ever been on. We're still like, it's the busiest group chat I'm on. Like, we are all, like, we were friends, like, full stop. We would have done anything for each other. But we were also so close that we could tell each other when we needed to cut the shit. And I think that's that accountability to each other. That's what I learned about. And that's like, I've taken that to company building. I've taken that to team building in the business world. And that was like my number one thing at Holy Cross.
That is awesome. So were you a leader on that team?
I was, so the way you would define me, I was not a leader on the ice. I think I was certainly, core to the team, but I would say my title was Chief Culture Officer. Like, I was in hockey. They have a thing called the locker room guy. That's who I am. That's what I was. And like going back to like my childhood and how I grew up, that's how I was on every team I was on, because I was never the best player, but I always worked my ass off. I was always the hardest worker, even though I wasn't that good. And I was always the guy that broke the ice and made sure like everybody felt like they're part of the team. And like, sports is hard, practice is harder, losing is hard. You gotta have fun in what you do. Like, life is too short. And I was definitely like the have fun guy in a good way though, like responsibly, for sure.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Well, so the reason I asked that is because like on a team, there's usually, this was kind of my experience, at least there's like pockets of guys that are really close. And then there's kind of like a couple stragglers. That's every single team, right? That you're kind of on. But the teams that were most, to your point, that were most successful that I was on, whether that's like a college summer ball team or going back to high school, whatever, like it started from the top with the leaders, right? It started with the guy at the helm, like it started with that guy, but then it was more so, it was maybe even more like the personalities that brought guys together, like on the team, like you always hear like the players only type of meetings, but that's why I'm just kind of fascinated by that. Like what makes the really strong team pretty much. So
yeah. I think it's the captains, dude. There's a book called The Captain Class, and they did this study of like the dynasties, like the All Blacks, the Patriots, all these different winning, or the Brazilian Olympic volleyball team, I think won like 6 gold medals in a row. And they studied these teams, they surveyed these teams, and the one thing they all had in common wasn't ownership, wasn't the coaches, it was the captains. And they lay out the characteristics of the captains. It's a fascinating book, and it essentially what it comes down to is like the captain carries the water bottles like everybody else, right? Like there's no like, oh, hierarchy, like you're a freshman, you need to do this, like none of that bullshit. And I would say they're 100% focused on winning. Like that's all they care about. So like Tom Brady's a great example of that, right? Like he will bend the rules to win. And that's literally, they look at the captains of all those teams, they all like look like Tom Brady.
That's not a deflate gate, right? Is that No, but it's so true though. I mean, and one thing that you talked about with your dad was picking up the pucks, right? And I can relate to that because there was a coach that I had who I actually had on this podcast. His name's Eric Duncan. And I remember like he would throw BP, and there's probably other instances of this, but this is just something that comes to mind. Like he would throw BP, and then if it was running closer to the game, he'd be like, "No, I'll pick up the balls. Like just go get ready, go warm up." And like that was just I don't know. It's like a really small thing, but just kind of something you remember. So it's kind of a
Totally.
similar thing to pick up the pucks. But so you're all right. So I want to get into a little bit like the transition out of hockey because I know it wasn't an easy, not even a super, it wasn't an easy one for you.
No.
So that time period, like you remember what you were feeling, what you were thinking, like what's going through JR's head at that time.
Yeah, I think the best way to talk about it without getting emotional is like just feeling like really, really lost. Um, Feeling like almost like I had wasted a lot of time, like I had wasted 24 years of my life, like because like everything, this is what I felt like, right? And you and I both know this isn't true, and this is why we do what we do. But I kind of got to this point, my dad came in my room after graduation. No, I had no like hockey opportunities, and he was like, "Dude, like you need to get a fucking job." Like, excuse my French, like that. He's like the show's over, buddy. Like you need to start paying bills. Like you need to start like working. And I can honestly say, like it was the first time in my life that I even thought about that. I was like, "What do you?" In my head, I'm like, well, no, I'm just going to do hockey forever, right? Like, so that was hard, and I think like the other big thing for me was my identity was tied to it. Like, if somebody said to me, "Who are you, JR?" I would say, "I'm a hockey player." Like, who are you, right? Like that was kind of who I was, and then one day you're just not anymore, and I really struggled with that. And for me, like growing up the way I did, and like I think I had this in my bones always. I had the behavior always, but I always had hockey as a governor. Um, I filled the emotional void with like drugs and alcohol, right? Like when you don't have purpose, what do you look for? You look for pleasure, and that's kind of where I headed. And it was bad. Like it was really kind of really bad, dark, like 3 or 4 years, maybe even 5 years, where I kind of went off the deep end. I got into some trouble. I got sick, and it took like a little bit of an epiphany, a little bit of a not intervention, but like a lot of hard conversations, being like, dude, kind of like nobody cares. Like work harder, right? Like, and I just had this like realization that I just needed to let go. And I think the other thing that made it harder for me, Joe, was at the same time I was going through that, I had a brother who was like leading the country in scoring in college hockey, signing an NHL contract. My other brother was going to play college hockey and like doing all those things that I wanted to do. And I was angry. I was jealous. I was resentful at them, at the rest of the world. And, the way I was as an Irish Catholic kid from Massachusetts, we never talked about our feelings, right? It was kind of just like,
No,
you can relate
go to
as
the
a
bar,
Philly
man. Yeah,
kid.
go to the bar and get it. Yeah, grab a beer. Yeah,
Exactly.
that's
Exactly. So yeah, that was really kind of what I went through, and candidly, it's that experience is why you and I are sitting on this call, is because it was painful, and I don't want other people to go through that. It's hard, and I had buddies on the veteran stuff. I had buddies that got back from Iraq and Afghanistan were going through the exact same thing I was, literally. So I knew that one, they had developed a lot of the same characteristics I had and mindsets, but also that loss of identity, that it's almost like I'm watching the Dallas cheerleaders thing on Netflix right now, and one of the cheerleaders talks about like, yeah, I'm 25 and I've already accomplished like the best thing I'm going to in my life. Like that's sad, and that's a shitty feeling, dude. And that's I think what a lot of athletes and especially military veterans, like you go fight for your country, and and you play in front of these people, and people cheer for you, and then you don't, and it's just like, well, now what, right? Like, so I think I dealt with a lot of that, and it was brutal, man. It was awful.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's why I'm working on this too, man. Cause I started like, yeah, I finished it and I was pretty burnt out with it by the end of when I was playing. I'm like, dude, I'm going to go work and like, it's going to be good. I'll go to happy hours in the city. Like, we're good, man. Like, there's no more baseball. We're done with this.
Yeah.
And then a couple years later, it's kind of like, all right, kind of what you said. It's like, did I accomplish everything that I have or am going to by the age of 22? And yeah, I mean, it's tough to find that next and not even play. Like, I can only imagine for guys. Well, you know what? It's really not even different. That's what I've been saying. Like, it's not different for if you played 10 years in the big leagues, maybe, or if you just played, I don't know, if you were on a high level high school team or a high level college team. Like, it's a very similar feeling. Um, so you kind of like you got on your footing, or you got your feet under you, I should say, a little bit, and you fell into sales and had a successful sales career. So, was that more of a mindset shift, or what was it that got you on that trajectory? Would you say?
Dude, it was 100%. It was mindset. Like it was, yeah, it was like first and foremost, it was like realizing, and this kind of happened through like I had leadership and people around me that had done it and been through it, and it was kind of like this epiphany moment where it was like you're surrounded by a bunch of people when you go into work. You're surrounded by a bunch of people, and there's people like you that have backgrounds like you, and then there's people that aren't. And it was kind of like, dude, you were so focused and so disciplined and worked so hard to play at the level you did, and here you are going through the fucking motions, feeling sorry for yourself, and all you have to do is like number one, just accept it. Like just accept it's over. Like, okay, that sucks. It's over. But just realize that everything you did up until that moment matters if and only if you can apply yourself to whatever's next the exact same way. And if you do that, you will be successful. Full stop. And that was the mindset shift that I had is like, yeah, I'm not going to shoot 500 pucks every single day anymore because I'm not going to play in the NHL. But whatever the skill is, I'm going to get really passionate about becoming excellent at it. And I'm going to practice it with intention because I know how to do that. I know how to get passionate about becoming excellent. I know how to practice with intention. I know how to perform under pressure. And I know what it means to have a purpose bigger than yourself and pursue goals. And yes, like all the actual details behind that, like purpose and pursuit and practicing and passion and performance are different, but the skeleton, the mindset is the same. And like I just have to like it sucks that like when I'm successful now, like I don't get a trophy and I don't get but dude, I get paid. Like that's pretty good, right?
Yep.
And like nobody's clapping for me, but it's still like I still feel really fulfilled. So like it doesn't even have to be sales. It could be anything. Like it's just really about whatever you decide to do. It's like just apply yourself the same way you did to athletics or service, and you're gonna get that same fulfillment. I can tell you right now, I did like enterprise IT infrastructure sales for 16 years, Joe. Which like whatever. It's a multi-trillion-dollar market. But like I didn't own a computer until I was 24 years old, right? So like it's not something I was talking about in seventh grade, like show and tell, like, yeah, I'm going to be a software salesperson someday. But I got passionate about it because all I did was apply the same mindset. So like that's what we try to teach our folks is like unlock that mindset, like get over the loss. You got to go through the cycle of grief, and a big part of the cycle of grief is acceptance. You got to accept it. It sucks, but you got to move on, and you got to leverage everything you just learned, and you just have to apply it to something else, and you can have an even better and more fun run in your second career than you did in your first one, and that's what we try to preach.
It's well said because you're not going to be passionate. So for me in the day job, it's like retirement plans. and I wasn't in sixth grade, like you said, show and tell, being like, going to sell a retirement play. It's like, dude,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
want to be a big leaguer, all this good stuff. But that's to you're saying like full stop. Like to be honest, that's been a challenge for me. Like
absolutely.
flipping that mindset, like getting to that. And I think that comes with like having ownership with it. And my job's like a little bit different. I don't have a territory, all this stuff, but like maintaining that mindset is challenging. So it's hard, man, but you gotta be consistent with it and stick with it. So I appreciate you talking about that. But then you, at some point, you were a successful, running a successful sales territory. And then you wanted to, what were you feeling when you wanted to start your own thing? Because that came to fruition. And did you get, I don't know, were you like, all right, man, I'm done with what I'm doing with sales. Like I want to do something for myself. Like how did
It was,
that originate?
yeah, it was a combination of a couple different things. I had the idea for Shift Group like probably like 5 or 6 years before I started it. I was getting the hockey world, just like the baseball world, is really small. And, because I was having a lot of success as a sales leader, um, the hockey world kind of like was noticing, and I was getting a lot of calls from guys and girls that were retiring and, getting connected with them and having the same conversation, which is like, JR, you're not that smart. You made a bunch of money. You seem to like what you do. Like, can you help me? And I was helping people like on my own time, nights and weekends. And then I was connecting them with companies that I knew, and these companies were hiring them and making a ton of money. And like it got to the point when I first thought of the idea in 2016, I was on my way. I was in Logan Airport. I was on my way to London for meetings, and I had a call with a kid who just retired from like the Southern Professional Hockey League, and I helped him. And I got on my flight. I was supposed to sleep, and I spent the whole flight building like the original deck for what is now Shift Group. That's not what I called it back then. And so it was always in the back of my head, right? And then, my career kept taking off after that, and I kept moving up the kind of corporate ladder, became a VP. My company was acquired for $2 billion, which was an awesome experience. And then I was a chief revenue officer, and I was still doing all this stuff on the side. And then finally, like, I spent the last few years of my career sitting in boardrooms with investors and executives and these like high pedigree people that were kind of like, not to like throw shade on people, but kind of people that were born on third base that think they hit a triple a little bit. And like, these are smart individuals, but they're no smarter than I am. They don't work harder than I do. They just have more life experience. So they were that's why they were in the seat that they were. And I kind of got to the point where I felt like, okay, I've had like enough life experience. Like I'm sick of doing this for other people, building enterprise value and, solving, a business problem that's super passionate for a founder. I have a business problem that I want to go solve, and I know enough to build a company. And I just said, F it. And, I call it burning the boats. I burned the boats. I quit my job and I just went all in. And, the rest is kind of history, but it was not, by no means was it an easy decision. And I was in a situation because of the acquisition, because of where I was in my life. I was at the time, wasn't married, no kids. I had no debt. And I'm like, it's now or never. Cause like, obviously I wanted to go do all those things, build a family and buy a house and all that stuff. And I just decided like, I'm going to do this now and it better work. But it also, like, to be fair, Joe, it didn't have to work. Like I could have failed and I could have went right back to what I was doing and I would have been fine. And I really respect the people that like put themselves in a position where it can't fail. But, I definitely had the mindset of like, I'm not going to fail. Like, because I'm an athlete. Right. So, it was quite the experience, but I was ready. I was absolutely ready.
Mm. So you burn the boats. So practically speaking, what did you do? Like, what were the first steps? Did you call a business partner? Is there a business partner? Like, what were the next? What did you do?
I did have like a co-founder who's like
okay.
Now like he's still our lone board member, but he was like he was kind of where I was at Turbo like 5 years ago. And he was like, dude, like, this is a great idea, but like, I can't spend a lot of time on it. Like, you should. And so I did it. In terms of like practicality, I literally called like 4 people in my network that were in a position to be like decision makers. And I called them and I said, hey, I get this idea. I'm going to get a bunch of athletes because I started with just athletes. And I said, I'm going to get a bunch of athletes together and I'm going to train them. And these were all like executives, but they were executives that had either worked with me or in some cases for me. So they knew like my chops as a sales leader. And I was like, I'm going to train them. If I train them and introduce them to your company, will your company pay me? And they were like, yeah, dude, hell yeah. That's a great idea. Like, send us some athletes. So I literally went on Indeed. I did a job posting on Indeed. I paid my own money and I got like 200 applicants. It was like, are you a former athlete looking for a sales job? Apply here. That was it. That was all it said. And then I would call, these kids would apply and I'd call them and I would introduce myself and they'd be like, yeah, I just applied. Like, are you hiring people? And I'd be like, no, I'm not. And they'd be like, is this a scam? And I'd be like, no, dude, like, I'm going to help you get a job. You don't have to give me any money. You just have to listen to me and trust me. I'll get you a job. And that's how I started the company. And I'd like, literally the first time my buddy introduced me to HR to like sign an agreement, I told him like what the plan was. This woman didn't know who I was, and I explained it. And she's like, yeah, this is awesome. Like, send us a service agreement. That's what it's called in the recruiting world. And I was like, what the hell is this? And so like, I didn't say this on the call, but I'm like, all right, I'll send it over either this afternoon or tomorrow. And I spent like the next 3 hours like trying to figure out what a service agreement was, like on Google. And like, our first logo was like crossed hockey sticks with like, and it said like Shift Group across it. And like, you know, I called a lawyer. I like spun up an LLC. Like it all happened in like 24 hours. And then I sent the agreement. They signed it. And I was like, whoa, this is wild. And then I introduced them to like 4 candidates and they hired 3 of them. And I made 24 grand in like 48 hours. And I was like, oh shit, like this could be actually like,
this is going to work.
Really yeah, exactly. I remember I told my girlfriend at the time, now my wife, I'm like, hey, it was like right before I quit my job. So I was still working at this time. And I told her, I'm like, I'm going to quit my job. And she was like, okay, like do it. Like, cause she knew what I like really cared about. And like, thankfully I had a great partner that supported me. And I just did it and sprinted. It's been a sprint. It's been an absolute sprint since then.
Yeah, man. I love it. As one of my buddies, one of my good military buddies, he said you got a fit for it.
Yes.
Figure it out. So you did that. And then what? Like you guys have just grown, man. Like you got a whole team. How many team members do you have at this point?
Dude, we're like up to 22 people, man. Like
22 people. Okay, because when I was looking at it, like you have sales folks of your own at this point. Is that right? Or like you just have a full team. Yeah.
Yeah, we got salespeople. So it's like the cool thing about my company and like my recommendation, candidly, like I get a lot of buddies that call me that want to start something and they always ask me advice. The first thing I tell them is like, don't raise money. Like, go make sure someone will pay you for what you're going to do. And they're like, well, it's a software idea. And our business is a software company now, but we didn't start as a software company. We started as a services company. And I'm like, well, if you can build it in software, that means you can service it. So service it first and make sure someone will pay for the problem that you solve. Like, solve your problem through services. And then if they'll pay you, use that money to go build like an initial version of the software. So that's number one, is like, don't raise money and dilute yourself like right away. And the second thing I think I did that's like made a huge difference for us is I did every single job in the company. Like every single job that we now have 22 people for, I have done it. I did it at the beginning. I did it in the middle days. We've recently hired people into roles that I was still doing, that I finally was like, I can't do this anymore and also be the CEO. So like, we need to hire someone. And I think the reason that works is because one, like, I figure out the challenges and like what type of person needs to be able to do the job. And number two, like I figure out because of my nature, like I'm gonna figure out how to do it right, and then I can train someone like, hey, this is how you need to do this, and they can't push back on me because it's like, dude, I did this. Like I've already done it. I've already proved that it works. Like this is the way you need to do it. And like obviously they're gonna refine it and optimize it. I'm not gonna hire people and just tell them what to do. Like I hire them so they can tell me what to do, but at least they have a foundation to start off of. So I think like that's really made a massive. So for your audience, anyone who's like thinking about the entrepreneurial road,
Mm-hmm.
like I can't recommend enough of like business is about making money. So go do that. Like if you want to start a business, go make money. And number two, if you're going to grow the team, like make sure these are roles that you know what the hell the role needs to be by doing it, not just like understanding it, if that makes any sense.
Makes a lot of sense. Yeah, it does. Um, so then as a CEO now, like what kind of leader are you still like the I mean, you probably can't be the locker room guy per se as a CEO. Like what kind of how would you describe your leadership style these days?
Yeah, I mean, I think I still kind of am
Okay.
the locker. I hired one of the biggest and probably most important hires I've made is a COO who's doesn't agree with everything that I do, which is like really important, right? We see the world very differently. We have different types of personalities, and I think like I talked about you've heard me talk about like my dad carrying the water bottles, and I still carry like that's my leadership style. Like if I need to get something done, I'm never going to ask anybody on my team to do something that I wouldn't do or I haven't done myself, right? So and I am I'm still the same kid at heart. Like I still keep it light, even when we're going through challenges. And dude, you got to understand the timing of when we started this business at the beginning of 2022. The economy was buzzing, the market was buzzing. It was filled with all this, post COVID money. Interest rates were zero, literally. Money was free. Companies were bloated, over hiring. All you needed was a resume with like crayon that says like I can work, and they would hire you. So like the first 6 months, I was like, this is awesome. Like this company's going to be humongous. And then like June or July 2022 hits, and half our customers, like literally in a week, reached out to us, and they're like, yeah, we're not hiring or we're firing like 20% of the people that we hired from you. Or I would get calls from our points of contact at companies being like, I just got fired. Like, I don't think they're going to hire from you anymore. So we ran into a complete buzzsaw. And I think like operationally and efficiency wise, like that has put us in a position that when the market started to come back, and it's going to continue to come back, like we're in an awesome position because we grew through a downturn. Like we grew through that environment. So we have like really good like behaviors and habits because we had to. Because if we didn't, like we wouldn't exist. I'd probably be a chief revenue officer at a software company right now if
Sure.
we didn't operate the way we did in the last 2 years.
Yeah, man, that's awesome. Yeah, and plus you learned a lot too. Like you learned what it's like going through that. So you're going to be even better off, I think.
Totally.
I feel like I didn't even really, and I want to respect your time here and kind of let you run a minute. Really didn't even let you explain like what Shift Group does. But if you're pitching that to somebody like in a sentence or two, how do you just get that message across?
Yeah, we bridge the gap between retiring athletes and military veterans in the business world. We improve the way that they transition into careers, and we improve the way that companies hire them. Full stop. Like that's what we do.
That's it.
Yeah.
It's cool because you're helping the athlete and the company. Like you're helping both at the same time. So
yeah, I would argue our value is probably higher for the company than it is for the candidate. Just like based off the data that we've seen and the outcomes that we've driven. Because we have like largely been focused in sales. That's not the full vision of the company and where we're going to be in a year or two. But starting in sales means that we went after the hardest. We went after the hardest career first, like in terms of attrition, in terms of turnover, and we're talking like the numbers that we've impacted. You're talking in tech, like our first industry we focused in before we got into others was tech. And you've got an attrition rate of about 40% in tech, and our attrition rate is under 5%. And that's like millions of dollars of saved for these companies. So like, yeah, we're changing their lives, the athlete and the veteran, but the companies, we're changing the culture of the company and the way that they're building these teams. And, that's going to have a lasting impact, and it's going to monetarily affect way more people than getting one person a job.
Oh yeah, for sure. So then where are you? I just want to ask you a question based on that. Like you started in just the sales. Is that going to be other industries as well? Is that the goal where you guys are headed?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. We want to get to the point where like an athlete or a veteran at any point in their career wants a job, whether it's their first job or their fifth job, and whether it's a salesperson or an accountant, they're going to go to Shift Group's platform. They're going to get free training. They're going to spin up a profile. And if you're a company that wants to hire a candidate for your role, whatever your role is, and you want somebody that's resilient and competitive and coachable and a good teammate with a growth mindset, you're going to call Shift Group. So, like, we are going to be the de facto platform for both of those situations.
I love it. I love it. And I think you guys are going to get there, man. It's just your mind, like the way that you've kind of kept chipping away and going. So I'm rooting for you. And JR, thanks for coming on, man. It was cool just to hear some of your background. I appreciate you sharing like some of the struggles on the way too, and just because everybody can relate to it, whether they're talking about it or not. So thank you. Where can, if people, maybe that's a current athlete, somebody that's in the military, where can they find Shift Group and find you guys?
Yeah, they can find us on our website is www.shiftgroup.io. It's really easy to navigate, and there's a page for candidates, there's a page for companies, there's a page for athletic organizations that want to give, and veteran organizations that want to give their folks in uniform a fighting chance when they get out, and kind of prepare them prior, because I don't think we do a good job of that. Right? I'm a great example coming from a great academic institution and not having a lot of tools when I hit the real world. So yeah, our website is probably the best place to start, I would say.
Love it. All right, JR. Well, thanks again, man. Keep rooting for you guys and just excited to put this out for people. So I appreciate it.
Joe, thanks for having me, buddy.
Yes, sir.